Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. If you were expecting Try, I apologize. You're stuck with me. I'm Sean. Try wasn't able to host today's webinar, so I am filling in here at the last second. So I don't blame you if you want to leave. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we are doing our monthly sort of new partner introduction webinar. It's primarily aimed at either new partners who have recently signed up and joined our partner program, or maybe those of you looking for a refresh. Maybe you've got some new staff you want to get familiar with our products. So this is that webinar. We'll go through a lot of products. We're not going to go too in depth on anything. It's more of like a high level overview to give you some ideas of the different products and solutions that we have. You can always reach out to your salesperson afterward, let them know about any products or solutions you'd like to learn more about, and they can help you out with that. As we go through today, you can ask questions. To send those in, you use the Zoom question and answer interface. So don't use chat, don't raise your hand, just send them in with question and answer, and I will do my best to answer them as we go through. And if I can't, I will absolutely answer them at the end of today's webinar. So we'll go ahead and get started with just a little background slide on us. So we are Zyxel Networks. Zyxel has been around for over 30 years now. We got our start back in 1989, and we've been making computer networking equipment and adjacent products ever since. We used to deal primarily in the service provider space, making modems, and still making modems for internet service providers, from analog to ISDN to now ADSL, fiber, CPE, et cetera, over on the service provider side. On the channel side of things, we make all sorts of different products that we'll get to here in another slide. But we've got over 100 million devices deployed out in the field, and we currently operate in 150 different global markets. You should be here because you have joined our partner program as a reseller. And as a reseller, you get additional discounts automatically applied when you buy through official distribution channels. You get a dedicated salesperson. You get access to deal registration, and some other tools as well. So depending on where you are, that tells us who your sales rep is. So if you're in any of those light blue states, your sales rep is Andy. If you are in those purple states, your rep is Jacob. And everybody else over there in orange, yours is David. So get in touch and use your salespeople as a resource for you. As you probably know, we don't sell direct. You need to purchase our products through our distribution partners. But our sales guys are there to help you out, answer any questions you may have on the products. They can do some pre-sales support. They can help you figure out what products to use for a solution. They can help you figure out which of our distributors has the product you're looking for in stock, et cetera, et cetera. So take advantage of our sales team, take advantage of those sales guys, and use them. If something's taken a while, you're not sure when something's going to come in, they can help find that out for you. So today's presentation is focused on what we call the channel, not the service provider side of things. So this is focused on those products that are used generally in business type environments on a local area network. So we've got security appliances, wireless solutions, switches. We have some small selection of consumer products that are available. And then we've got some different network management solutions. So we're going to hit on pretty much everything here except for those consumer products today. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Nebula, which is our cloud managed network solution. And this is something that touches all of our three key business product lines: our wireless products, our switches, and our security gateways. So Nebula is a free cloud-based management solution. So if you're familiar with Cisco's Meraki, same sort of idea. Everything is managed through the cloud, and we'll go through some of the benefits here. So to start with, it's been designed from the ground up to simplify things and make things take less time. So you can have a new site up and running in just a few minutes if you want to, provided there's no advanced configuration required. It doesn't take much to get switches, access points, and gateways up and running. You can start setting up your customers' networks and your products before you've even had the products delivered, heck, in some cases, even before you've finalized which products you're going to use for your customer. Give me just a second. Sorry about that. So one of the benefits here with Nebula is at any point you can log into the Nebula interface and you can set up a new customer, start setting up new sites, and you can even start configuring those settings before the product is there. Once you have received the product, all you need to do is scan the QR code found on the outside of the box, or alternately underneath on the belly label of the products. Um, and then you just simply assign it to your customer and the site under that customer that's going to use it. And then you ship the product off. Once it's been plugged in and has power and an internet connection, it will update its firmware to the latest version and it will download the configuration that's been assigned to that customer site. So everything's ready to go. There's nothing you have to do on the units themselves physically, other than make sure they are plugged in and get a network connection. Now, there's a couple products that aren't quite that easy. The security gateways have a couple extra steps for security reasons, and also our security-focused GS1350 series switches. You do have to manually go in and tell them to you want to use Nebula for management, but otherwise everything else will automatically, if you've decided to manage it in Nebula, will automatically reach out to the cloud, find out that you're managing it, and take care of everything itself automatically. There is no additional hardware or software that's required. There's no cloud keys. There's no virtual machines that have to be set up. The agent for talking to Nebula is built into the hardware itself, and then everything is then hosted in the cloud through Amazon Web Services. So basically, you don't have to worry about setting up VPN access to your customer sites or port forwards or anything like that. You have access to all of your customers and all of their networks anywhere you have access to the internet and a web browser. All updates and configuration changes are done through the cloud over the air, including firmware updates. So there's generally very little reason that you need to go on site to update or change something. And Nebula has been designed from the ground up to be a place where you can manage all of your customers. So when you log in here, this is showing you a customer site dashboard. This is the first thing you're going to see once you've logged in and selected which customer you want to manage. Most of these widgets here are customizable, so you can hide or add which ones are beneficial to you. But some examples of some of the information that you see on there is things like how many devices are assigned to that customer site, how many are currently online, how many are offline, PoE utilization versus your budget, how many wireless users are on your wireless network currently. If you're using one of our gateways, we can do some analysis and show you, which users are using different amounts of bandwidth, which applications are using your bandwidth, some security reports of what the UTM services have been blocking, etc. Up here at the top are two drop-down menus. One is a list of your customers. So you choose the customer you want to manage, then choose the drop-down which of their sites, assuming they have more than one you want to manage, and it'll quickly take you over to that customer. So it's really quick to jump back and forth. And then over here on the left is all your different configurations that you're going to do. So Nebula itself is absolutely free. There is no limitation to the number of devices you can manage in the free version of Nebula, and there is no limitation to devices. So no limitation to customers, no limitation to devices, all with the free version of Nebula. And Nebula unlocks configuration of all of the core features of our different products. So when we first launched Nebula back in the day, it was similar to Cisco and how they handle Meraki. If you wanted Nebula, you buy Nebula products. If you want traditional management utilization, you would buy a separate SKUs of products. So a few years ago, we decided, yeah, it doesn't really work. So now what we have is something called Nebula Flex. So Nebula Flex basically means products that say Nebula Flex, they can be managed your traditional way, or they can be managed in the cloud. It's up to you how you want to handle them. So that way you can standardize on certain SKUs and models, and you can use them for all of your customers, whether you're going to be using Nebula or traditional management. We do have some products that are called Nebula Flex Pro. So the primary difference between Nebula Flex and Nebula Flex Pro is Nebula Flex Pro includes a bundled 1-year license to the Nebula Professional Pack. So Nebula Professional Pack is an optional license that unlocks additional features in Nebula for you to use, primarily aimed at MSPs and primarily aimed at giving you more options as far as reporting and diagnostics go. In the case of access points, Nebula Flex Pro also means those access points can also be managed with a local area controller. So even if you're not using Nebula, if you're planning to use a local controller to manage your access points, you want to be looking for Nebula Flex Pro products. So that's it for Nebula. We'll jump through here to security. One of the product lines I know the least about. So with our security products, we have been ICSA certified now continuously for 20 years. So ICSA is an independent lab, currently I believe owned by Verizon. It's had a few different owners over the years, but they create, test, and certify standards for security appliances. So our security appliances have been certified by them for over 20 years. When it comes to UTM services, Unified Threat Management, those are the gateway-based additional security features like antivirus, anti-spam, content filtering, etc. Most of our competition does their own in-house signatures for identifying viruses and doing the content filtering and things like that. We're a little bit different. Rather than try to do it in-house, we instead turn to the experts in their fields and partner with different experts to help power our UTM services and the signatures that we use. So some of the companies that we have relationships with are McAfee, WebRoot, LastLine, Trend Micro, and Bitdefender. So some of the features you will find in most of our security products include things like the ability to create link aggregation groups, the ability to do high availability on your security gateway. So if your gateway fails, there's a second one that can automatically take over. The ability to do SSL packet inspection. So we can still apply those UTM rules and our other rules in the firewall, even if the traffic is SSL encrypted. Radius and Active Directory integration. If we have multiple WAN ports, we can do WAN load balancing. We have the ability to have multiple WANs. You can do mobile, out of band backup or out of band access using either our LTE 7461 and plugging it into one of those WAN ports, or basically buying any cellular based modem and plugging it into one of those WAN ports. On the security side for VPN access, we have an SSL VPN secure extender that works with Windows and Mac. So it's a lightweight SSL based VPN client there. We support L2TP over IPsec, which is something that's built into Windows and stuff like that. You've got Easy VPN to simplify configuring and setting up VPNs. And then on the UTM side of things, which set of features and who's powering those depends on which model line you buy, but most of them offer some form of antivirus, category-based content filtering. We offer what's called Layer 7 application intelligence. It allows you to create firewall rules based on applications and in many cases based on individual features or functions of those applications. GeoEnforcer. Our ATP series has sandboxing and machine learning to identify zero-day threats independent of anybody else, so you get faster response, intrusion detection and prevention, reputation filters, etc. So in addition to all of that, our security appliances also are a local wireless LAN controller. So most of them will be able to manage at least 2 APs, if not more, out of the box. And similar to Nebula, if you're using our access points and you want to manage them locally like this, there's no configuration of the access points required. If you set up and enable the local wireless LAN controller, those APs will automatically find it and talk to it. So there's no configuration that needs to be done directly on the APs to manage them this way. And then we have an option that can be added on with a different license, which unlocks advanced hotspot features. So guest access with a captive portal, usernames and passwords, etc. And then for those of you that use cloud-hosted appliances, we are certified with both Microsoft and Amazon's AWS to create a virtual private cloud. So basically, it's a VPN connection from our gateway to those cloud-hosted solutions, which allow you to access those cloud solutions for your users as if it was locally hosted. So that's something where we've actually gone through the steps to get certified for both of those. So now we'll start talking about the different classes or models of products here for you in the security lineup. So to try to make it similar or simpler here, we've broken it up into 3 different categories we're calling simplicity, flexibility, and ultimate. So here's a quick breakdown of the features that are in them. Under the simplicity line is our VPN series. So those are going to be models with VPN in the name. And they are focused, as the name would imply, really on firewall and VPN functionality. They don't offer a lot of the added on additional security services. If you want those, you will go up to, say, the USG Flex, which also offers firewall and VPN functionality, but it also adds content filtering in there, geo enforcer, that layer 7 application control, malware blockers, intrusion detection and prevention, anti-spam, etc. And then the step above that, the ultimate series, is our ATP series. So any of the models with ATP in the name, very similar to the USG Flex, but they add some more newer advanced features, including what we were talking about before, which is this ability to use the cloud and artificial intelligence and sandboxing to be able to detect threats that haven't yet been officially documented and signatures released. There we go. So we have another feature here called Sd-Wan. So Sd-Wan is a feature of the VPN series. So basically you buy an Sd-Wan license and you use that to convert your VPN appliance into a software-defined WAN license. So for those of you not familiar with software-defined WAN, it's basically a way of enhancing VPN functionality for site-to-site VPNs. And it takes advantage of the fact that basically you control, or we control, the WAN ports on both ends between two or more different sites. And because of that, we can sort of violate the standard way that certain IP protocols and other protocols work to optimize them to create really fast, really stable VPN connections between sites. It's specifically been designed to replace something like MPLS, where you would go out to your ISP and you would get a dedicated connection between your sites. So SD-WAN is designed as a way to be able to replace expensive, slow MPLS connections with lightweight, fast VPN connections over traditional standard internet connection. So I'm not going to go too far into it. If this is something you'd like to learn more about, reach out to your salesperson. It's really technical stuff here as far as how it works. But basically the list here is we can optimize TCP acceleration. We have stuff we can do that can optimize latency. To reduce latency, we can reduce packet losses. And the ability to assign bandwidth as needed in real time. And by doing this, you can make some tremendous increases in performance here and reliability, which allows you to use VPNs for things such as having a central VPN, or excuse me, a central VoIP server, and then have these SD-WAN VPN connections to remote locations. So their phones are actually using that central dedicated server and won't have any of the issues that you normally run into in such an environment. So here's an example here. This is a connection between our German office and our Taiwanese office. You can see the stats down here. It's a round trip 290 millisecond ping time between these locations, 0.3% loss, 3 milliseconds jitter. So you can see we tried to transfer an Ubuntu ISO. It's a 1.9 gig file. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes to transfer that file. When we enable SD-WAN optimization, that same file took just 10 minutes to transfer. So a huge difference in performance on VPN. So we'll talk briefly here about the ATP series. ATP stands for Advanced Threat Protection. So the way traditional UTM appliances such as our USG Flex work is basically traffic comes into your gateway. It is then compared to signature files that you get either from the manufacturer or in our case from third-party vendors, your anti-spam, your antivirus, etc. And it checks to see, does this traffic match what we're seeing, match one of these signatures? And these signatures will include things that are good and will include things that are bad. But there's a lot of traffic out there that they won't have signatures for, especially when it comes to newer types of traffic, whether evil or good or whatever. So ATP is designed to sort of solve this issue where there is this gap in knowledge of what certain types of packets or behaviors we're seeing, whether they're good or not. So we do this using the cloud and using artificial intelligence or machine learning in the cloud. Basically, as something comes in that we don't know and your device doesn't have a signature for, it has the ability to sandbox that, upload it in the cloud, and then in the cloud, it's able to go through lots of different virtual machines that emulate different computers, different network configurations to figure out what that new traffic is. Is it good or bad? And then it'll automatically push out an update to your device saying, hey, this is good traffic, let it through, or this is bad traffic, block it. And the way this works is basically every ATP device is connected to this cloud. So you're going to be, as soon as that new type of traffic reaches out to the internet, somewhere there's going to be an ATP that's going to encounter it, upload it into the cloud. And then once the cloud has figured out what's going on, it can push out the new updated signatures to all the ATPs. So when that type of traffic finally is encountered by those other ATPs, they'll already know whether it's something that should be blocked or allowed through. So this service is not something we're doing in-house. We have partnered with Lastline. They're the ones who power the sandboxing feature and this machine learning in the cloud for us. So we'll talk really briefly here about SecuReporter. SecuReporter is a tool we have that works with our security appliances. Similar to Nebula, the idea behind this is to give you a central location you can go into and see what's going on all of your customer security gateways. So it takes data from the logs, uploads them to the cloud where analytics are performed, and then we generate a number of reports showing you what's going on. So it's going to tell you things like, who has been accessing websites they shouldn't be, whose computers have been getting targeted, et cetera. What sort of attacks were these, what sort of problems were these, and when did it take place? It's a user base, so it can tell you which users, maybe going to sites they shouldn't be, or which users are, for some reason, keep seeming to try to download files that they shouldn't, et cetera. So like Nebula, it's been designed with the idea that we know you've got a lot of different customers out there. So it's been designed from the ground up to manage different customers, different sites, and make it easy for you to see what's going on. You can set up custom analytics for each customer based on what they want, set up customized alerts for you, as well as create customized reports. So a really handy tool to use to show your customers, hey, you're paying for these UTM services on our security gateway. Here's what it's doing for you, right? Because generally your end users, they don't see, the firewall blocking stuff or preventing bad things from happening. So by being able to generate these reports, add your branding to them, send them to your customers, you can help show them, hey, this is what we've been doing for you. This is how this is protecting you. And then when their licenses come up for renewal, they'll understand that, yes, they are getting a benefit by renewing those services and continuing to buy UTM functionality from you. So now we will move on to switches. We've got a lot of switches out there for you. So I'm going to just to start with naming. By looking at the model name on the price list or somewhere, it will tell you what type of switch you are looking at. So if you're looking at something, you'll be able to quickly sort of figure out what it is, or alternately, if you need something in particular, the model naming will help you sort of limit, which models you should be looking at. So to begin with, if the switch starts with the letters ES, it tells you it only supports speeds of 100 megabits per second. We don't really sell these here in North America still, but they are out there in other regions. If you see a model name that starts with GS, it's telling you that is a gigabit switch. All ports support 1 gigabit. If you see XS as the first two letters, that's telling you that this is a multi-gig switch. So all of the ports are anywhere from 2.5 to 10 gig, depending on the switch. So everything is at least faster than 1 gig speeds. If you see XGS, that's telling you that probably most of the ports are 1 gig ports, but there are 10 gig uplink ports on that switch, or some other multi-gig ports for the uplink. And then MGS are our Metro series switches. We don't offer those really here in North America, but again, if you wind up on our global website somewhere or in a Google search, you may see that. And then if you look at the end, there's very often, after all the numbers, there is going to be some letters. So if you see a P, it tells you that it's an 802.3 AT PoE switch. Is that right? AT, I think I got that right. Anyways, it's going to limit you to 15.4 watts of power per port. If you say HP, that's telling you it's a PoE plus or PoE plus plus switch. So it'll provide either up to 30 or 60 watts of power per port. And just about everything we sell these days has the HP on there if it's providing PoE. And then if you see an F, that's telling you you're looking at a fiber switch. So if you need a switch that just has fiber ports, look at those model numbers and find one that ends in an F. We also have something on our switches called combo ports, and sometimes it causes a little confusion. So basically, we'll look at that photo there that's up on the screen. You'll see on this section here, right? We've got 2 copper ports and 2 fiber ports. So that may have you thinking there are 4 ports here, right? There's 4 physical ports, but in the back end, there's only actually 2. So you've got 2 ports, and each port can either be copper or fiber. So it's giving you the flexibility without having to use an SFP to use fiber or copper for each one of those ports. So there's actually 2 ports that are supported, and you choose which you want to use there. So this is just showing here, if you see a switch that supports SFP ports, those are fiber ports up to 1 gig. If you see SFP plus, you can use SFP plus modules, which give you speeds up to 10 gigabits per second. And we do offer all sorts of different SFP modules. When it comes to switch stacking, most of our managed switches offer some form of software stacking, either when you directly manage them or through the Nebula interface. On the higher end of things, we do have some switches that support physical stacking, and that's where you've got a really high-speed connection linking multiple switches together. For those, if you're doing physical stacking, you need to buy what's called a DAC cable, which is a short 10 gig fiber cable specifically designed to connect switches together in a stacking environment. So as we mentioned before, when it comes to PoE, we support 802.3 AF. So I was wrong, it should have been AF. AF is the 15.4 watts per port. PoE plus, which is based on 802.3 AT, gives you 30 watts of power per port. And then PoE plus plus, which is also known as 802.3 BT, gives you 60 watts of power per port. Okay, we've got lots and lots of different series of switches. So we've tried to group them together roughly based on management capabilities or the market segment they're aimed at. You can see we've grouped here the effortless series. So these are going to be your unmanaged switches. So 100 series, 1000 series, 1100 series, 1300 series. Then we've got simplicity. These are sort of your basic web managed switches. So that would be the 1200 series and the 1900 series. And in general, as you go up in numbers, so in this case from 1200 to 1900, you gain additional functionality. And in this case, most of the 1900 series are rack mountable, where the 1200 series are all desktop only. The flexible series, these are more feature-rich web-managed switches. So these are the 1350 series, the 1920 series, and the 1930 series. So when you're looking at a switch model, you will see something like GS. So there's telling you gigabit. Then you'll see a 1920. So there's your series. Then you will see a dash with the number of ports or approximate number of ports. And then if it's PoE or fiber, then you'll see a letter on the end. And then our ultimate series here, it is our older 200 series switches, 2210s, 2220s, 3700, 3800, and 4600 series switches. So these are our layer 2 plus, layer 3 switches. These ones all offer, in addition to a web GUI, a command line. So if you're one of those old school guys that needs to have that command line, those are the models you should be looking at. And then when it comes to Nebula management, you're looking at the 1350 series, the 1920 V2 series, and the 1930 series in the flexible section here. And then under Ultimate, the 2220s and 3800s. So we'll go through these pretty quick. This is just showing you here, here's our 1200 series, right? This is our lowest end switches that offer some sort of management through a web GUI. They offer some basic VPN functionality, link aggregation. So you can see these are available in 5 and 8 port configurations. And then on the XGS series, you've got these 10 gig uplinks, which add a couple extra ports. So that's why you'll see here XGS, which is telling you most ports are gigabit, but some are multi-gig for an uplink. 1210, so it's telling you it's a 1200 series. And then you've got -12, which is the total number of ports available. And then the step up from that is the 1900 series. As you can see, these are mostly going to be rack mountable. These give you more functionality handled through that web interface, bigger PoE budgets. And then from there up is the 1920. The 1920 is probably our best-selling series of switches. They give you almost a full layer 2 feature set. They are all web managed. They can all be managed through Nebula. And then we've got the XGS 1930 series, very similar to the 1920s, only these have 10 gig uplink ports on them. The XS 1930, basically the same as the XGS 1930s, only all ports are multi-gig. And then the step up from there, this is probably our second best-selling series of switches, the GS 2200s. So these give you Nebula management, but these give you that command line interface as well. And this is just showing you here the XGS series. So again, very similar to the 2220s. Currently though, the 2210s are not Nebula manageable, but these give you those 10 gig uplink ports. So if you're looking for a layer 2 with 10 gig, this is what you want. At some point here in the near future, these will be replaced with a Nebula manageable version of these. So we'll just want to talk briefly here about PoE. Again, and we have a feature that we have there that you may not be familiar with, and it's intelligent PoE management. So basically, the standard way PoE is supposed to work is basically devices identify themselves by class, and depending on the class, the switch is supposed to reserve that amount of power for each device of that class that's plugged in. The problem you run into is those classes are nowhere near granular enough. So for instance, you can go from a class 3 to class 4 is a 15-watt difference, right? So it goes from 15 watts to 30 watts, and then it goes from 30 watts to 60 watts. But oftentimes you don't need a lot of that. You only need a couple watts above the previous class. So if you're using class management, you often end up with a bunch of unusable power budget. So we have the ability to monitor the connected devices, see how much power they actually need, and free up that additional budget for other devices that are connected. So example here is a IP phone. It is a class 3 device, so that tells your switch reserve 15.4 watts of power for me. But realistically, it only needs 9 watts of power. So you free up, a 6 watts of power basically by switching and using our consumption mode or our intelligent monitoring mode. So it basically shows here on the bottom here that if you had 24 of these phones, if you're using the classification method, you need a switch with 370 watts of PoE budget. However, using consumption mode for those 24 phones, you only actually need a budget of 216 or more watts of power to be able to power them. Another example using a pan tilt zoom IP security camera. By classification method, it needs 30 watts of power. However, it's only actually needing 16. So using the standard method to hook up 20 of these, you would need 600 watts of power on your switch. But realistically, using our intelligent mode, you only need a 320 watt power budget on your switch to power all 20 of those cameras. Now we have our 1350 series of switches. You may remember these from when I was talking a little bit about Nebula. So these are a series of switches that were built specifically for those of you doing IP cameras, that sort of IP security market. So they've got some additional differences in them. So for one of them, you do have to log in and switch them to Nebula mode if you want to manage them in Nebula. And if you want access to these advanced features in Nebula, you need the Pro Pack. Now they come with a 1-year Pro Pack license, but some of those features are going to need you to renew that license if you continue to want to use them. So what are these features I'm talking about? So these features are, again, designed for this IP camera market, but it's not exclusive to that. Some of these features are very beneficial in other environments as well. So one of them is your standard PoE Ethernet range is 100 meters. So you can only go 100 meters between your switch and the device that's supposed to be powered up to it. We have the ability to put these ports into a 250 meter mode. It'll work with any PoE enabled device. It doesn't require anything special to work with our 250 meter mode. The trade-off is, in order to get to 250 meters, is we drop the speed of that connection to 10 megabits per second, which in a lot of applications is more than enough. We have the ability to do continuous PoE. On most switches, when they reboot or apply a certain configuration changes, they may disable PoE and reboot, which causes your connected devices to also have to reboot. So with the 1350s, we can provide continuous PoE. So even if that switch is rebooting, it will continue to provide full power to the connected devices. So those devices don't have to reboot themselves. We also have the ability to log in and see the status of connected devices. So you can see here, what speed their connection is, whether it's currently up or down, their current PoE power draw, the device's network name, the IP address for the device, etc. We also have an automatic recovery mode. For cameras, you use LLDP, but you can also use this for any device that will respond to a standard ping. So you can basically monitor or ping that device, and if it stops responding for a period of time or a certain number of checks that you define, you can have it set up to create an alarm or to automatically reboot that device by power cycling it. And they're a little bit heavier duty when it comes to surge protection and things like that. So that's that 1550 series. And then we'll talk just one slide here on accessories. So we do offer a whole bunch of SFP modules that you can use. Unlike certain other vendors, we don't force you to use our SFPs. But if you're buying our SFPs, you know they'll work. Sometimes when you buy third-party SFPs, you run into compatibility issues. So that's one way around it. So we offer SFP modules, SFP plus modules, and those DAC cables if you're doing proper stacking. Okay, so that's it for switches. Now we'll jump to wireless. So we've essentially broken our wireless products up into 2 series these days. The flexible series, which support Nebula Flex, and the Ultimate series, which support Nebula Flex Pro. So the flexible series are those models that are 3 digits or more in the model name that start with 1 or 2, such as an NWA 1123 ACV3, an NWA 210AX, etc. And then the ultimate series is going to be those models that have 3 or more digits that start with 5 or 6, such as AWAX 610D. Now, we do have some other access points out there that are aimed more at that sort of consumer do-it-yourself SOHO space. Those ones, their model names have 2 digits. So I'm just not talking about them, but they are also Nebula manageable. Basically, all of our current APs are Nebula manageable. We've got a handful left of some non-Nebula manageable devices if you really want those, but just about everything current is going to be Nebula manageable. So our APs are built differently than most of our competition. It used to be at the trade shows, we would have, a couple of our APs. We'd have a Ubiquity AP, a Ruckus AP. I think for a while we used to have a Meraki, and we had them opened up so you could feel them, open them up, and look inside to see what we were talking about. And it basically has to do with how we build things. So we've built our products and made them, designed to last and are optimized for RF performance. Even our cheap little $99 access points are built using this philosophy. It's why a lot of our cheaper APs can still offer a lifetime warranty where most of our competition is only offering 1 or 2. So what we've done first off to extend longevity, right, we've got a solid state device here. So there's not a lot that's going to fail. But one common source of failure is electrolytic capacitors leaking, drying out, burning up. So we only use solid state capacitors. There are no electrolytic capacitors in our APs. The other major cause of failure is heat fatigue. You've got a bunch of little teeny tiny electromechanical switches, that make up your computer chips and whatnot. You've got your solder joints. All of these can fail over time due to heat fatigue. So because of that, you'll notice our housings all have a lot of vent holes in them, unlike some of our competitors that don't have any. But we also have this massive metal plate that goes behind the PCBA, which is something that none of our competitors offer. And basically, this is a heat shield. It's designed to draw the heat off of the board and then vent it out those holes on the top of the case to keep everything inside cool and to prevent that heat fatigue. And then when it comes to RF, you'll notice a couple other things. If you open up ours and you open up our competitors, you will see we have a lot more shielding on the main board than our competitors do. And that's because we build in shielding not only for EMI issues, but we also build it for sources of external interference, including from 4G and 5G signals. And then you will also see most of our competition, even a $1,200 Ruckus AP, they mount their antennas directly to the same PCBA, which holds the boards. So we don't. We put our antennas on a separate PCB separated from the main board here. And on most models, there will be a metal shielding plate between the main board and those antennas. And the idea behind doing this is it costs us a little bit more money, but it provides much better isolation from interference from EMI issues. So you get a little bit better performance on those edge cases. When you've got the users that have really poor signal to noise ratio, this is the difference between a slow but stable connection and a connection which is just frustrating and keeps dropping. We've also got some technology on our antennas that most of our competitors don't offer, so you may not be familiar with it. The first one is what we call dual optimized antennas. Your traditional AP has one set of antennas that are fixed, and they're optimized for you to be mounting your AP on the ceiling directly over the area to be covered. Unfortunately, in the real world, you don't always get to do this. Many times you have to mount the AP on the wall. So that changes the antenna pattern, right? It's designed to be above the users, but instead it's over here, in front of or behind the users. So the signal is suboptimal as far as coverage goes. And if you're in a multi-floor building, depending on what those floors are made out of, you can get a lot of interference issues between the floors. So our solution is this dual optimized antenna. So those APs that have this, have 2 sets of antennas, one for your traditional ceiling, and then one that's optimized for being mounted on the wall. So you can choose, depending on where you deploy that AP, which set of antennas you want it to use. We also have smart antenna technology. Just to go through here, smart antenna is different than beamforming. For some reason, some people think they're the same thing. They are very different technologies with different goals. So smart antenna has been designed primarily basically to maximize wireless performance. So it's designed to solve some of those issues you run into out in the real world, where you add access points, but you still have problems with your quality of your connection, or it may even get worse as you add additional access points. It's for those of you in environments where you're in a multi-tenant building, where you only have access to control and moderate your APs, but your neighbors have APs that may be causing interference issues, etc. So again, this just comes down to your traditional AP has one fixed antenna pattern. It's designed for the idea that it's mounted above the area to be covered. So the challenge you run into when it comes to Wi-Fi is basically only one device is allowed to broadcast at a time, with the exception of some MIMO type stuff. But for the most part, one device broadcasts at a time. So if you have another source of interference, it can be something like, in this case, it's a microwave. It can be a piece of industrial equipment. It can be simply your neighbor's access points. It can be, any sort of wireless device that's also using the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz spectrum, which is pretty much all of them. So the solution to this is this smart antenna. So with dual optimized antennas, we had two different antenna patterns we could choose based on whether we've mounted the AP on the ceiling or the wall. In the case of smart antenna, we have hundreds of antenna patterns to choose from, not just one, not just two, but hundreds. And basically the access point intelligently and in near real time can go through those and find the antenna pattern that is ideal based on where the AP is in relationship to that client to focus the signal towards the client it's trying to talk to. But in addition to doing that, we've optimized our algorithm to also take into account other sources of RF interference. So the AP basically can ignore those competing signals and just focus on the signal that's coming from the client. And this is a technology that's done entirely on the AP. It requires nothing special on the client side of things. And unlike beamforming, it handles roaming and moving clients great. They don't have to be stationary. So this is just showing you here a comparison here between two different APs. Ours is the green one, Aruba is in blue. Both have roughly the same power output. Both are the same wireless configuration. The difference is smart antenna. As you can see, pretty significant performance gains between the two. Now, a number of years back, a group here at the University of Brescia in Italy, these saw claims that ourselves and Ruckus were making in regards to smart antenna, and they wanted to test them to see if these were true. So they did a really thorough report looking at us, Ruckus, smart antenna vendors, and then non-smart antenna vendors, Aruba and Cisco, and wanted to test our claims, does smart antenna make a difference? So you can see there's a little link down there. I'll leave it up for just a second if you want to write it down, but that'll take you to the page where they posted the entire white paper that goes through all the tests and all the things they did. Now, to summarize the key ones, at least as far as we're concerned, is basically in interference prone environments, which in the real world is pretty much all of them, up to a 70% performance enhancement between our products with smart antenna and non-smart antenna products. And in the cases of comparing us to Ruckus, we actually had 45% better performance than Ruckus in those interference environments. Now you can also just Google Zyxel smart antenna white paper. And we've got a white paper that you can print out and give to your customers. It goes a little bit more in depth on smart antenna and the test results. So we'll talk a little bit here about Wi-Fi 6. Basically, Wi-Fi 6 is a new technology. It's basically the first sort of rewrite of Wi-Fi that's been designed to solve all the issues that Wi-Fi has. It's been plaguing it since the early days in the late 90s when it came out. I do some dedicated wireless webinars where we go more in depth into some of those issues that wireless has. But it's basically designed to be faster, in theory, up to nearly 10 gigs throughput. And again, that's going to be the data rate between the two devices, not what you see. Your throughput's probably going to be, if you do a speed test, .NET test, probably be just like standard Wi-Fi is going to be somewhere around 40 to 60% slower, just due to all the protocol overhead. Higher capacity, more users per AP, more APs in the same area without interfering with each other. And the really key one here is dual band. Wi-Fi 6 operates on both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz radio. 11AC, the previous standard before Wi-Fi 6, only worked on the 5 gigahertz radio. So if you had a dual radio device that claimed to be 11AC, yes, it was, but only on that 5 gigahertz radio. The other radio, the 2.4 radio, was still using 11N based technology. So Wi-Fi 6 is a nice step up for 5 gigahertz and a huge step up for 2.4 gigahertz users. Now, I do want to draw your attention here. Some of our competitors out there only put the Wi-Fi 6 on one radio. They still continue to ship products with 11N on the 2.4 radio. Ubiquiti does that, and there may be some others that do that on some of their APs. It introduces a number of cool new technologies for us. The ability to do multi-user MIMO in both directions. 11AC gave us multi-user MIMO from the AP to multiple clients. Wi-Fi 6 allows us to do multi-users talking back to the AP at the same time. OFDMA for better allocation of the available airtime when you have multiple devices sharing like this. Higher levels of encryption. Something called BSS coloring, which allows us basically to tag the packet who it's for so other devices recognize it's not for them. The ability to tell devices when to wake up to check for data or to send data, so you get better utilization of the airtime. Okay, and just to let you guys know, there is something new called Wi-Fi 6E. Wi-Fi 6E, the E stands for extended, now takes us to being able to provide Wi-Fi in the 6 gigahertz spectrum. Currently, it only allows 6 gigahertz operation indoors. You cannot use them outdoors. Outdoors is coming, but there's some lawsuits involved, and the FCC still has not standardized on certain additional requirements to be able to use Wi-Fi 6 outside. Again, I've got a Wi-Fi webinar where we talk more in depth about some of all this stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, check out those webinars. I've got some coming up. I've also got some that we've done in the past that are recorded and you can find on YouTube. And for us, Wi-Fi 6E products, soon. We announced them last month. We're still waiting on the FCC to get around to looking at our test results and to approve them. So hopefully that happens soon and we'll be able to start selling those here in North America. They may already be available in other markets that don't require FCC. So we do, in addition to being able to manage APs directly or manage them in the cloud, as I mentioned before, we do have an on-premise controller that is built into most of our security products. And it gives you basically the same sort of features you find with Nebula, zero AP configuration deployment. So basically the AP, when you plug it in, it will check, is there a Zyxel controller on the network? And if so, it'll configure itself to talk to it. If it doesn't see that local controller, it will check with the cloud. Am I been assigned to a Nebula location? If so, it'll convert to Nebula mode. And if neither of those, it just stays standalone mode. But you can do, intelligent channel selection. We've got mesh technology, just like with Nebula, fast roaming, just like with Nebula Management. Something that is different is it does have the ability to do rogue AP detection. That is not a feature found in Nebula, only on the local controllers. But most of these other features are roughly the same. There may be some differences in how they're implemented or configured, but it's basically the same sort of stuff here: dynamic VLAN, load balancing, etc. So here's a breakdown of most of our different security models. And this is just showing you here how many APs can be managed out of the box. As you can see, most devices can manage either 4 or 8 APs out of the box. And then there are additional licenses you can purchase, which will unlock additional. So you can see here a VPN 50 supports 4 out of the box, and it can support up to 36 APs with additional licensing. The VPN 1000 out of the box will manage 8 APs, and you can unlock up to 1,000 APs that can be managed with that VPN appliance. That, guys, is the end of today's webinar. I know it was long. Thank you for sticking around here till the end. I appreciate it. Um, all of our presentations are uploaded, or almost all of them are going to be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. So go check that out. We are called Zyxel America channel on YouTube. There's a lot of different Zyxels on there from different regions and fan accounts. So Zyxel America channel is the official one here for North America. And then you can find us at Zyxel US channel on LinkedIn. Any questions, you can send them in to me. I haven't gotten any. So I guess I've been doing a little bit better job explaining things than I normally do. But if you've got something, use that question and answer interface to send it in. My email is also up there on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me directly with feedback, questions. It's Shawn R. Shawn is spelled S-H-A-W-N, and then the letter R at Zyxel.com. And also, just to draw your attention for those of you that are still here, we do have user forums where you can reach out to other installers and users of Zyxel equipment. These forums are also monitored by our product management and R&D teams in Taiwan. They will often wade in to answer questions. It's also the first place where we post things like release notes, security advisories, etc. So it's a really good place to create an account and keep an eye on so you can see what's going on. I've got no questions, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.